Hi, welcome back to I Hate Everything About Movies. I am your host, Brandon Ferrier. Today we are talking about Legally Blonde, the 2001 film directed by Robert Lukatic, based on the 2001 novel of the same name by Amanda Brown. Legally Blonde follows Elle Woods, a fashion student from Southern California University who follows her ex-boyfriend Warner to Harvard Law in an effort to win him back. Today I want to talk about the feminist themes that exist in this film, whether they are on purpose or not, and I want to talk about its role in feminist culture as well. But because of the fact that I am a male, I don't feel that I can fully talk about this with the justice that it deserves. So I have Ellie Lemler here with me today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ellie. Thanks so much for having me on the show today, Brandon.
So, Ellie, just right out the gate, what's your stance on Legally Blonde? Do you like the film? Do you have problems with it?
I think that the film is obviously very interesting, and it's pretty intriguing to the eye. I think when you don't look at it as to what is going on a deeper level, it's just, surface level. It's great. It's a good movie, Mm-hmm. But when you really analyze it and analyze the feminism behind the film and also, the culture at the time when the film was made as well. This was 20 years ago now at this point. So it's a lot different, the culture back then versus the culture now.
Right.
But I think that I would agree with you that the film was not made to be feministic on purpose.
Yeah, I agree with you in that regard, that I think the movie was made in the aim of comedy rather than
I agree.
Trying to take a concrete stance on feminism. But, many films don't set out to take such a stance and then sort of kind of arrive there eventually. And I feel like this is one of those cases. One of the things that I think is really interesting about Legally Blonde is its commentary and sort of the satire that it provides.
Yes, absolutely.
On what it means to be intelligent. Yep. And what it means, what looks mean and how they play into how people perceive you.
Right.
One of the things that I think is really interesting throughout the film is, especially when she arrives at Harvard, a lot of times what they'll do in the film is they'll dress people who are deemed as more intelligent in sort of blander colors, or they'll be, sort of made to be boring people.
Right, their personalities are more bland as well.
Mm-hmm. And actually, one of the things that I found in the film was when she was talking with her father about wanting to go to Harvard Law, he comments that, being intelligent and being smart is for ugly, boring people. And I think that kind of is sort of interesting how people in the film and maybe even people in real life sort of, sometimes they kind of equate intelligence and beauty sort of inversely.
Yeah.
Where people who are beautiful aren't intelligent and vice versa. I just want to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah. I completely agree. I think it's also interesting that you talk about that, about the theme of stereotypes throughout this movie as well. Because I feel like Elle's stereotype, she kind of breaks that towards the end of the movie. That's what the movie is about her defying the stereotype. And I think in the beginning of the movie, especially when we look at the admissions process, I think we can find a lot of stereotyping in that specific scene. Obviously, Elle doesn't seem on the outside, on the exterior, seem to care that much about her education. And they make it seem in the opening of the movie where she's being followed around in her sorority house and, all these girls, they're in exercise rooms, they're being kind of airheads, and that's how they're portrayed in the movie. Right. And so you associate Elle in the same way to these other sorority girls. Mm-hmm. And in the admissions process, her admissions video, she plays off of her looks. And we can kind of see and evaluate that in our culture today, too, how people use their looks as an advantage in life. So I think That's an interesting stereotype we can play off of, too, because she's stereotyped in the way negatively that, oh, she's so pretty, she must not be smart. And that's exactly why Warner breaks up with her in the first place.
Right.
Because he needs someone of that high classy image, and she doesn't match that in his head. But I think we can talk about that a little bit too, about the pros and cons of being good looking in our society as well.
Right. One of the things that I'd like to talk about while we're on the topic of stereotypes is one of the things that I find really interesting is in the dinner scene when he actually breaks up with her. Warner comments that he needs a Jackie and not a Marilyn. If you don't know, he's commenting on the fact that he needs a Jackie Kennedy rather than a Marilyn Monroe. And I think it's very interesting that he uses those as his two specific examples because, for those of you that don't know, Marilyn Monroe at the time, when she was alive, was sort of symbolic of like this very like sexual symbol. And there was a lot of talk that President Kennedy had an affair with her, and that, you know, that she represented in a lot of people's minds this sort of like sex symbol, whereas Jackie Kennedy was more of like the academic,
Right.
in that sort of regard. So I think it's kind of interesting how he uses this analogy to sort of equate Elle's intelligence to her looks.
Right.
And sort of say, well, you can't be intelligent because
Yeah.
you fit the Marilyn aspect.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's interesting also because both of those women were successful, but he was almost undermining Marilyn Monroe's success because her success was based on how she looked.
Right.
And I think that's another interesting aspect is coming from Warner, whose character was, you know, from a high-class family, and all of them were lawyers, and his dad was, you know, a hotshot, and that's what he wanted to be as well. And he mentions how his older brother married a Vanderbilt. And so he didn't think, you know, Elle could fit that role. And his assumptions towards the beginning were honestly fair, too, because she didn't seem like she did care all that much about
Right.
making her intellectual dreams come true. She clearly just, like, was very focused on the goal of getting married to Warner. And that's kind of where we see the shift in the movie is after that dream is crushed, like, what does she have left? And I think she realizes that she can work hard and make that happen. Even if at the time it was for the wrong reasons, she obviously learns down the line that she can be successful in her own way.
Yeah, I found that throughout the film, maybe not so much in the beginning, but towards the end, most definitely, we sort of see this thing with Elle where she kind of strives to be more than her looks. You know, when she's in the car talking to Emmett and they are talking about how she's discriminated against because she's blonde, or when Callahan hits on her and she's very upset because she believes that the only reason she's there is because of her looks. It sort of seems like because of the way that she's perceived and sort of the way that you're talking about the pros and cons of being beautiful in our society, because of the way that she looks, she sort of doubts herself and second guesses herself when she either gets unwanted attention or she's picked for something because she might think, well, you know, this might only be because of the way that I look. And I think that's a very interesting commentary that exists in the film.
Yeah. I would have to agree with you. Also, going back to the idea of almost nature versus nurture in society on like the mold that you're put into based on your appearance. And I think that's an interesting one because we see in the beginning of the movie, obviously, how you mentioned with Elle's father saying like, oh, sweetie, lawyers are for the ugly people who can't be beautiful, you know? She's placed into that mold. And I think that growing up, she was probably placed into that mold as well of being an airhead blonde.
Right.
And so she never had that opportunity for herself to make and be what she wanted. And I think that's interesting too, because maybe it goes the same way for that classic stereotype of being super tall, like, oh, you should play basketball. Or I think there's a lot of, we're often very stereotyped based on how we look, just because that's like a certain mold that people think you should fit into.
Right. Exactly. And I think that one of the things that I really enjoy about this film, and I think it does very well, is showing that a lot of times when we talk about intelligence, people equate intelligence to only existing as book smarts, and sort of there's only one kind of intelligence. But I sort of like how in this film, Elle displays her own kind of intelligence throughout the film. Even from the beginning, when she's in the store buying her dress, and the saleswoman tries to trick her into buying this other dress. Her knowledge of fashion and of the types of fabric and the type of stitching allows her to tell the saleswoman, well, no, you're lying to me. And I think that's interesting. And that also comes back later when she wins the case because of her knowledge of perm maintenance. I think that showing those different types of ways that people can be intelligent, and it's not always, I'm very good at books and school and that sort of thing. I think it's very important to the central message of this film is that if you believe in yourself and you don't listen to what others say, despite everyone saying the same thing, you can probably do a lot.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think the directors definitely played off of the aspect of stereotypes to make it pretty comical. But I think at the end, there's definitely a deeper meaning of success, especially with Elle and all of the stereotypes she had to break in order to get to where she was. And I think that's very valuable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think that's just about all the time we have for today. Thank you, Ellie, for stopping by to talk with me.
Of course, I'm so happy that we could talk about this.
This movie's a 2001 film. If you haven't seen it yet, I don't know why you haven't, but if you haven't, you should probably watch it. Hopefully we didn't spoil anything too major for you in this reading of the film. But anyways, it was good to talk to you guys. I'll see you later. Bye.